Good evening and welcome to the Wakefield School Committee meeting of Tuesday, March 27th, 2018. We'll begin by calling this meeting to order and standing for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And as always, I'll read the mission statement. The vision of the Wakefield Public Schools is to graduate students who are confident, lifelong learners, who are respectful and caring members of their community. Our mission is to prepare students for college, career, and community by providing rich and challenging curriculum, high-quality instruction, and educational experiences that meet their individual needs and interests. Okay, and with that, we have a public comment period tonight. I know most of you are probably here to speak in the public budget hearing, but is there anyone who wishes to speak now, just general public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will move into our Student Advisory Council. Kaya.
All right, good evening, everyone. So starting on Tuesday today, MCAS is being administered to the sophomores, so freshmen, seniors, and juniors had late starts on today, tomorrow, and Thursday. Tonight, actually, like right now during this meeting, the Galvin Middle School is hosting a presentation for mental health awareness for anxious parents, anxious kids, strategies to interrupt the worry cycle. And that's by Lynn Lyons, which was a free event. And also, the seniors have the Credit for Life Fair tomorrow morning while the sophomores are taking MCAS. And seniors are basically playing out a scenario where they're a 25-year-old adult, and they're simulating an entire month's worth of expenses to see if they can make it without spending all their money, and like seeing how much money they can save towards the end. And prizes are being given out, including Boston Calling tickets and prom tickets.
Thank you, Kaya.
So continuing with that, on Thursday at the Savings Bank Theater, there's going to be a lecture in the Sweester series called From Darkness to Dynasty, the First 40 Years of the New England Patriots. Admission is $10. This Friday, March 30th, there will be no school in observance of Good Friday. And next week, starting on Monday, April 2nd, the diversity leaders at the high school, the juniors and seniors, will be going down to the middle school to begin their presentations to 7th and 8th graders on their curriculum.
Grades at the high school close next week on Tuesday, April 3rd. On April 4th, Wakefield Public Schools will be hosting a safety summit at 7 p.m. at the Galvin Middle School. School and district administrators will present safety protocols and answer any questions related to safety. And on April 4th, high school parent-teacher conferences will take place.
On April 6th, there's going to be a METCO/WPS sponsored internationally at the Galvin Middle School, and there's going to be different cultures, foods, artwork, and performances. Last week, there was a trip to London from the high school, and I actually went on that trip, so I wanted to speak a little about it. So the past week, I went on our school's London trip for the first time, and it was the experience of a lifetime. It was sponsored by a company named World Strides, and we did a variety of things, like going to a couple of workshops, experiencing the different culture, and watching different plays like Matilda. And we had an amazing tour guide named Caroline, and the schedule was nonstop the entire time, so we were really busy. And as a history person, my favorite part was the history. And so we did a couple of things like touring the Tower of London, Salisbury Cathedral, the Roman Baths, and so much more. And so experiencing the tube and the culture and talking to the locals was really, really amazing. And I also wanted to bring up the Greece-Italy trip that we're having during April vacation as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything for our Student Advisory Council tonight? Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you. Nice work.
Okay, consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the February 27th, 2018 meeting?
I move the school committee approve the minutes of the February 27, 2018 school committee meeting as presented.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Okay, we're past 7:35, so we can go into our public hearing. Is there a motion to enter the budget hearing?
I move the school committee open the public hearing on the FY19 school department budget.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. That's a roll call vote. Judy, would you mind calling the roll?
Mr. Callahan?
Yes.
Ms. Fortier?
Yes.
Mr. Liakos?
Yes.
Mr. Marco?
Yes.
Mr. Kiro?
Yes.
Ms. Milligan?
Yes.
Mr. Matt?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so we are in our public budget hearing. So thank you all for coming. I just have a few kind of housekeeping things before we go on. We do have a sign-in sheet for those of you who are speaking. Just a reminder that, this is not a give and take. The school committee is here to listen. We ask that you don't engage in any, don't bring up your own personal issues about a school, about your children. No personnel issues can be raised. Call Dr. Smith for those. We're going to allow discussion related to the budget, obviously. We ask that you keep your remarks to about 5 minutes. We're not going to buzz you, but I will kind of raise my hand if you get to 5 minutes. Just when you do speak, please go to the microphones and please begin with your name and your address. And with that, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak tonight? Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Scott, 75 Elm Street, and as I say at all the town meetings that I attend, I will be the soul of brevity. And this is Bill, my neighbor, and he's going to comment on a few things. And what we're here for tonight is, about 150 yards from here, we have a very unsafe situation with the backstop during the baseball games, balls going out in the street. And Bill's going to speak about that. He plays a lot of tennis. I'm in the twilight of a very mediocre tennis career myself, but I do see the balls going all over the place. And we're very concerned as far as public safety. We have met with the athletic director, and I think there's various things that we can do to improve it, either replace it, but it should be moved up and more protection put around it. It could be solved right there. A lot of places have put netting around the tennis courts, and I don't think that's going to solve the problem. But I think if we really get a committee together and work on this, and I understand there might be some money in your capital outlay budget to start this process, and we can also raise some money within the town. I know you have a tight budget, and I'd like to turn it over to my neighbor, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. My name is Bill Conley, and I'm a neighbor of Jim's and a longtime Wakefield Tennis Association member, tennis player up at the courts, various other activities supporting tennis in the past. And I think I can offer two things in what Jim has brought up. I think there's some momentum again and some reason to look at safety relative to foul balls that leave Walsh Field. And this is not exclusively a tennis issue, as we've come to find out. There's safety in the street, there's safety for fans, there's even safety for players now that facilities are doing something about relative to protection. We've looked at this for a number of years. We've walked around up there, we've talked to DPW, pass. There's a couple of things that I think are changing what's happening. And first of all, there's more exposure. And why? Well, the tennis courts are now in great shape. It's a great facility. There's more tennis being played there. But not often thought about is that there's more baseball being played at Walsh Field. Why? Because now you get on the field early in the spring. Before, the high school teams would be at Moulton Field till, if we had a wet spring, almost half the season would be over. So they're there earlier. The summer leagues are now very prominent. Walsh gets a lot of use, and the fall leagues are something that wasn't that abundant, if you will, 15 or 20 years ago. And obviously the problem's been there for since the courts were built and Walsh Field. So there's more exposure. And why is it a problem now? Well, I think it's just a matter of time. And anecdotally, and that's all we have, members of the WTA and talking with them, high school coaches who we've talked with and worked with, adults who come by, there's been many near misses, there's been hits. They don't get documented, they haven't been serious, thank God. But I think it's a matter of time. And with more exposure, the time has come to do something, we believe. That's the position of the WTA. I can speak for them. Now, as far as the solution, Brendan Kent has looked at this for a while. We met with him and a few other people in the meeting. We looked at the options that Jim presented. For a long time, the options were throw poles up, throw netting up, get them high enough, put them up on the hill, use the existing light poles. All of those are either overly expensive, don't address the whole full problem of safety in the area from foul balls, and require maintenance, and there's unknowns in any type of construction up on that hill relative to conduit under there and so on and so forth. So what do you have? You have an existing backstop that is straight up and relatively short and 60 feet or beyond from home plate, which far exceeds the requirements for ground rules in a stadium, in a high school athletic field. So Mr. Kent's thoughts are a well-engineered, well-placed, that's the emphasis, well-placed backstop that has the required height or exceeds maybe the normal height, but to address the safety issue of balls leaving the field, can be as high as necessary with probably extensions that may provide public safety, player safety, fan safety, street safety, and tennis court safety. Now, when you're at the game, I'm a tennis player, so I need to make one point. Solar brevity, I'm not. Thanks, Jim was. When you're playing tennis, your mind is not on the ball field at all. And all of a sudden, you know, there's a ball coming in. So there's no way to prepare or anything like that. You don't hear the call of heads up. You're playing tennis or you're watching tennis and you're concentrating on that. When you're at the ball game, you're watching the game or someone's watching the game, someone behind you. So when there's a foul ball, it's kind of part and parcel of being, you know, at the game. Someone gives you a heads up, might knock a ball down. Doesn't speak to the safety of people driving by the street or people just walking by and not paying attention to the game. But so I think there is a real exposure getting back to that. I would ask respectfully for the school committee to talk to Mr. Kent, get his ideas, develop those ideas about a well-engineered backstop closer to home plate that would provide probably as much reasonable safety protection we can for all in that area during baseball games. And that's a request from WTA and our informal committee that's been kind of working this in various angles. So, thank you.
Thank you.
This mic's on, right? Yeah. Actually, if you move that present backstop up 30 feet, it's 60 feet from home plate to the backstop. That's a long way for a ball to travel, and it just goes straight up. And if maybe you need a new backstop there. I don't know how old that is. I know they put those back braces on it maybe 10 years ago because it was wobbly. But I think the problem is right there. I don't think you need fencing up near the tennis courts. Some places have it. They have netting, but I think the big problem is right there at the backstop. And if you contain it there, move it, make it higher, put an overhang on it. Common sense, I think, tells you that you can make some progress that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone from the public?
Thank you. I'm here tonight as a parent who is very concerned with the special ed department. I'd like to briefly explain to you what a parent experiences with a child on an IEP. The process begins with the parent noticing that their child is struggling academically. It's recommended that some testing take place, which sometimes takes 4 to 6 weeks. The testing does in fact show some deficiencies. The team meets and the child is placed on an IEP and receives some reading services. Over time, you realize the child does not seem to be making any progress, struggling to do homework and getting very frustrated. Next, you decide to hire an advocate to help you better understand what's going on. You request a new team meeting with your advocate and you quickly notice the tone of the meeting is much different than before. The team appears defensive, and it becomes very clear why. Your advocate begins to suggest, for example, that the child could be dyslexic or has some severe language-based learning disabilities, and more intensive services are needed. Services such as the Lindemood Bell instruction or Orton Gillingham instruction, LIPS and OG for short. These are very specialized services that focus on dyslexia, encoding and decoding, phonemic awareness, visualization and verbalization, speech and language, fluency and comprehension. These specialized services are provided to a child in a one-on-one setting. However, in order to prove this, the advocate suggests you getting some private testing, often a neuropsych exam, speech and language exam, and sometimes a classroom observation. These tests are very expensive, not often covered by insurance. An adequate neuropsych exam could cost up to $5,000, speech and language, $2,000, and a classroom observation, $1,000. This testing takes months. Sometimes there is a six-month wait list just to get in the door. You request a new team meeting to share the testing results, feeling hopeful because now you have professional proof that the district can now begin helping your child. Unfortunately, this is definitely not the case. The fighting and the stonewalling begins. This can go on for several months, if not years. All the while, the child is not receiving adequate services, and the child is regressing, feeling more and more frustrated and often depressed. Finally, the advocate says, time is of the essence. Proper instruction is a priority, and you may want to begin thinking about an out-of-district placement. As the parent, you are now completely numb, wondering, how in the world is this happening? And the advocate says, you're going to need a lawyer. The process of finding the adequate school could take up to a year, everything hinging on school availability and, of course, all the legal negotiations, costing the family thousands of dollars. Students on IEPs in our schools are in desperate need of specialized services, and given the recent unexpected fiscal year 2018 out-of-district placement increases, it would appear that the district's only solution to solving these problems is sending our children out. This situation should be taken very seriously, but I would like to suggest a plan to fix it. I propose that the district intervention service budget line be used to hire 3 or more highly qualified, highly experienced, highly trained LIPS and OG specialists as full-time employees to fix the critical problem happening now in our district, especially at the Galvin. These new full-time employees will effectively provide the adequate services our children need. They will be able to accommodate the rotating 6-day cycles. They will be able to act as a liaison between the special ed teacher and the general ed teachers. And they will be able to integrate the child's current academic curriculum into their instruction. By hiring these qualified professionals, the children will have access to the best individual services and enable them to make academic progress, be more confident, and become happier students. From a budget standpoint, hiring these professionals will allow the district to service the children within our schools and ultimately decrease most unforeseen out-of-district and transportation expenses. For example, one child placed out-of-district could cost the town approximately $50,000 a year. And I think it's pretty safe to assume that there are at least 7 out-of-district placements for language-based learning disabilities happening right now in our schools. That's $50,000 per child, or $350,000 a year, a recurring expense which could extend for years. And please note that the transportation expense is not factored into these numbers. Hiring these professionals can also give families who currently have children out of district a confident option to bring their children back to Wakefield. Something I know from experience is the best thing that can actually happen for the child and the family, not to mention saving the town thousands of dollars. Hiring these professionals is a sound economic investment that will benefit our children, families, teachers, and schools. Hiring these professionals will keep our children in their schools where they belong while successfully reducing the out-of-district budget year after year. Wakefield has a unique opportunity to pioneer a new way to service and teach children with language-based learning disabilities and to enable optimum student success. Myself and all these other concerned parents here tonight are hoping that this committee and the administration will consider our concerns and help fix the very broken special education department. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you would just please begin with your name.
Good evening. I'm Patty Gaffney, 6 Bellevue Ave. And I'm piggybacking on what Amy said. I'm here on behalf of special education and the fact that we need to fix the way we're teaching our children who are on IEPs. As you probably know, autism affects 1 in 52 children, which is 2% of the population. So every school in Wakefield is affected by autism. What you might not know is that dyslexia affects 1 in 5. That's 20% of students in your district. This means that every classroom from kindergarten to 12th grade sits a child, or possibly 2 or 3, who have dyslexia. And that's a lot of kids. In fact, Congress also agreed that it was real when it included dyslexia as a qualifying condition under the specific learning disability. And this was in 1975. Since that time, we have collected a tremendous amount of evidence. I have a bag of books I've read. I've educated myself. I've done studies at Tufts, at MIT with my children to learn what they need in order to access the curriculum. About how dyslexia is manifested in the brain, how it's manifested in the classroom, and the genetic component of dyslexia. But more importantly, we know what works for students with dyslexia, just what Amy said. Despite this mountain of research that has been well documented, well-attended IEP meetings on a regular basis, we all attend, IEP meetings on a regular basis to hear, this is how we do it here. Or, we don't have that here at Wakefield. Or, maybe out of district's best for your child. When my child is very successful in the school district and is thriving, but just needs specialized instruction to learn how to read. Our concern tonight is that these bright children are marginalized despite the vast amount of research. They are held back, asked to change, when instruction is what needs to change. They are denied the right to reach their potential due to our district's continued lack of education in the area of dyslexia. This is a civil rights issue. When 20% of a school district struggles to read and spell because of dyslexia, and the district refuses to respond with an appropriate intervention, they fail not only to provide a free, appropriate public education on a regular basis, but they violate the civil right to an appropriate education. Tonight, we implore you, we beg you, to provide every child in this district the right to read by increasing the district's intervention line to provide much-needed special education services and to keep our dyslexic children in the district where they thrive and continue to grow socially and emotionally. Does it seem wise to spend $50,000 or more for one child to go out of district when you can hire teachers who can provide specialized instruction to 20% of our children? Today we have one qualified teacher at the Galvin who services 20% of that population at the Galvin. That's about 110 students. Can you sit in front of us and believe that our children are getting the proper services from that overworked teacher? These kids are being told to sit in the back of the bus, while those who do not have dyslexia are treated to the education they deserve. Lastly, I would like to assure you that if schools fought as hard for those with dyslexia as they do against it, you would have a completely different and substantially less impacted special education system. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gaffney.
Elena Corradino, 4 Swansea Road. I'm here to speak about personal experience of a parent that has special needs and to emphasize the importance of the increased budget for the proper public school supports in the district. This is about all children, including my child, that are lost in the system because they may be misunderstood or some aspect of their disability are not acknowledged or recognized. They're defined and judged by what they lack rather than what they have. They're not accepted by peers, labeled by parents, and often isolated socially because they're different. Their exclusion as invisibility serves to be rendered them vulnerable. These are children that need academic support for learning disabilities, emotional support for behavioral disabilities, or special support for their specific need. An article published in the Daily Item in 2017 reviewed the local SPED program. If Wakefield prides itself on the statistics of inclusion, then they need to provide the services for these complex children who are lost in inclusion with the services that are lacking for all of the needs, including mental health conditions, to successfully support the student to succeed in school. It requires trained, qualified professionals to recognize the issues and support them so the child can practice the multiple skills they lack, so they successfully negotiate and traverse the challenges of life, learning, and socializing. Excuse me. These children may not look compliant, or they may look stupid, when in fact they're the same as any other child. They're no less, but are struggling as many of these children's needs go unmet. The goal today is to bring awareness of the need to increase the budget to afford these services. Inclusion for many of these students is challenging for them. They're unable to access the adjustments that meet their needs. We need to break the number of barriers to provide more specific, appropriate supports for special needs students in our public schools. We need more intensive therapeutic treatment that may not be able to be served by the district without additional specialized, trained support staff, or unless they're in a separate setting. If our children had diagnosed disease such as cancer, any one of us would go to great lengths to get the doctor or the medicine to help them succeed in beating the disease at any cost. So why shouldn't we go to any cost to help special needs students succeed in school and life? There are many unrecognized conditions that affect children that are not corrected with medication alone. These conditions are often left the child lonely, sad, difficult for them to understand, and challenging for anyone affected by them to deal with. These children are left to navigate the expectations of the public school. Funding can impact the amount of resources, providing adequate trained staff in the areas of trauma. Trauma, with many children, they feel like it's a battleground in the school, which leads them to develop behavioral coping mechanisms. These behaviors are profoundly misunderstood. Anxiety, depression, ADHD, bipolar kids on the spectrum, behavioral issues, dyslexia, nonverbal learning disorder, a current condition that is not even recognized by the school as it is a special need, but it significantly impairs a person's perception, interpretation, social cue recognition, and learning ability. This would require multiple specialists who understand and recognize the likes of tutors, resource rooms, regulation rooms, mentors, trainers, behavioral and academic support, individual support therapists, small classroom setting. The public school should have a guaranteed place for these students to fit. They shouldn't be forced out of the system. My daughter's IEP, she's out of the system because she couldn't get the support. We can't expect the educators or even the special educators to teach these children without a shared understanding of the child. As a parent and educators, it's our responsibility to make sure that all of these children are supported and they feel safe and can fully participate and succeed in proper comprehension and with integrated services. Have access to experienced and qualified teachers and identify the issues of the needs to teach the skills and supports right here in our own public school. Please consider funding the budget to allocate the money to train the staff, hire the trained staff. Cost of services within the district would ensure that our children can receive the supports within the Wakefield Public School District. They would not be separated from their peers, placed outside of the district for help. This would make them feel included, successful, and good about themselves. As a parent who grew up in the Wakefield school system, I'm very proud of it, and I think we should set an example. Thank you for listening for my concerns of supporting children with special needs in the public school.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kelly Quilly. I'm the school nurse at the Walton School. I'm here with my fellow school nurses, and we're just here to address the need for a full-time nurse. Right now, there's one nurse at the middle school, one nurse at the high school, and there's another nurse that's split in between that time, but that time is usually she's pulled to cover field trips. We had a letter sent to Dr. Smith and to myself from the Department of Public Health last May saying that our recommendation student to nurse ratio is not meeting our needs. With over 1,000 students at the middle school and over 1,000 at the high school, it qualifies for 2 nurses. Right now we only have 1.5, but basically it's not 1.5 because that nurse is pulled. If we don't see an increase in that need ratio, the Department of Public Health won't certify our medication delegation, which means field trips. If anyone has an EpiPen or a med, the nurse will have to go. Right now, we cannot find enough sub-nurses for our field trips. We have the nurse covering. So we're just here to state our need that it's not safe at the middle school and high school with just 1 or 1.5 nurses. We need 2 nurses there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Yes, please.
Steve Nardone, 15 Whittier Road. Mr. Chairman, I understand this is not interactive.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, sir.
This is not interactive, correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, I will give my speech in a series of questions that I'm looking for answers to. You don't have to answer them, obviously. So after talking to friends, parents, taxpayers, and listening to the parents in here, a couple of questions I would have is, I'm assuming there's a special ed director and that oversees all this. And I'm wondering, has anybody ever done some sort of analysis or done some research to see how much money could be saved, or possibly none at all, if these children were brought back in district that were out of district and full-time specialists were hired? It seems to me that we would save a considerable amount of money, not only on the cost of sending them to school, but also on transportation. So I don't, if that's available, then I'd like to see that. And also, as far as the budget goes, I think I read in the paper, now you can't always read believe what you read in the paper, but that the superintendent presented a 5.5% increase in the budget. I'm not sure if she's actually in charge of that or what the story is, but my question on that is if the selectmen put a cap of 4% on the budget, then why do we come in at 5.5% over budget? Just don't understand where that came from. And I also read and heard that there is, we're creating a social studies curriculum coordinator or something to that effect, and at $75,000. So I'm wondering that, now we have all these concerned parents about special education, and is there any research or is any analysis done with the social studies department that would mandate that this is necessary? And if not, then why doesn't this money go into special education or somewhere else for that matter? Why is that totally necessary? So I'm just wondering if there's any research done or any analysis, anything to back up any of these decisions that the school committee is making. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Mr. Bray.
Andy Bray, 3 Highland Ave. I just wanted to say, in deference to what's been raised about SPED and the nursing situation, I just want to say something positive and say thank you to Dr. Smith and her administration and the school committee for the work that went into putting this budget together. I guess to speak to the comment about the 4%, is it 4% or 5.5%? There's some structural stuff around why it's 5.5%, and part of it is around, do we take 1.5% off the top to get to 4% and fund our special education stabilization through a different mechanism? So it is a little bit of a numbers game. We could get to 4 if we wanted to do it a different way, and I think you'll hear about that at town meeting. But I did want to just commend this committee and their counterparts in the Finance Committee for coming together this year really early in the process and creating that level of transparency that I think everyone wanted, and fixing some of the communication issues that came up last year where some on the Finance Committee were really surprised with the budget when it came to them, and some communication that wasn't happening back to them through the liaisons. And I think that's been a really positive thing that you all have a joint working committee that started the work back in October. And I think that's really helped to get everyone on the same page early. And I guess I would just want to speak to the budget itself and the budget process that we use and we have used over the past at least 5 years. I feel like we create a lot of transparency early in the process through the budget forum, and I think that's a really good thing. I wish we had all the funding to meet all of the needs, and I know that we don't, and we make really difficult decisions every year. I'm glad that those decisions are driven from what I feel like are driven from our instructional strategy of the district, where, I think everything that is on our wish list that manages to make it in the budget, there's no question about where that fits and what need in the instructional strategy it's addressing. And I feel really good about that. I feel like, it's like we're on a mission, and the instructional strategy is our mission. And those expenditures come right out of that instructional strategy. Now, obviously, we have some unmet need, and some of those needs are really big and personal and heartfelt. And I'm always one to want to do to kind of rise to that occasion and do what we need to do to help those people and help every child be the best that they can be within our district. And I always want to do more for that. And I know that we have budget limitations that don't always allow us to do that, but those decisions are really, really painful. One thing I was going to comment on before it even came up was the notion of a social studies curriculum director or coordinator. And for me, I think that's really important. We're wrestling with new curriculum for social studies. I feel like that position and the positions in other subject matters that we've added in the past couple of years have been really key and timely as we're making those new curriculum decisions. We have a big expenditure on curriculum and instructional support materials in these subject matters. We really need someone who's on point across grade levels, across even buildings in some cases, that's really driving that decision making. They're kind of our point person that's making sure we get that right, that $200,000 plus or whatever it might be in a particular subject matter, is the right material. It's teacher driven, and it's informed, and it's through those curriculum director positions that I think we're doing that. And I think that's a really good thing. And I like it. There's different models for that. Sometimes it's more centralized. I like that we have it at the subject matter level. I think they're much closer to what's going on within the classroom. So I would say that in my mind, that was a positive. And then lastly, one ask. I wish we could do more on digital literacy coaching, particularly in elementary and middle school level. We had, some time ago, we added library media specialist positions. And at the time, we knew it was a compromise. It's a lot to ask one person. Library science is one thing, digital literacy is another thing. And we managed to get some people in those positions, but there's been a lot of turnover. And in my mind, I think part of that is we're asking too much from one individual. And I'd love to see us find a creative way to staff our libraries and then really make these professionals available for teacher coaching in digital literacy. So just something to think about for next year's budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beth Boudreau, Unicircle. I wasn't planning on speaking. I'm just here to support the movement for special ed. And I just want to add to it, it's kind of fitting that there's an anxiety seminar being held tonight at the middle school. My daughter suffered through severe anxiety, and it's, as a parent of a child with an IEP with anxiety, it is an incredibly difficult road. Was able to get through it with the support of the administration, but the special ed IEP process, to say the least, was extremely frustrating. So do you consider funding to help some of these students? Anxiety is a huge one that is often overlooked. And as someone else alluded to, it's a disability you can't see. Someone could be in this room with anxiety and you don't know it because it's invisible. And it is huge. It is a huge disability, and I can only imagine the attendance across town. If that's any indication, we need some resources, because there was basically none for my daughter.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak at our public hearing tonight?
Just in case I didn't make myself clear earlier, I just would like to say that I do not think that funding a social studies coordinator is as important to teaching kids that can't read to read. Thank you.
Anyone else? Great. Well, we thank you for coming. We thank those of you who spoke for speaking. As was alluded to, the school committee is elected partly to weigh competing fiscal interests It's a difficult thing to do, it always is, but hearing from parents and hearing from community members goes a long way to helping us make those decisions. So I thank you for that. Okay, and with that, is there a motion to exit our public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, I move the school committee close the public hearing on the FY19 school department budget.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. That's a roll call vote. Judy, can we get the roll? Thank you.
Mr. Callahan?
Yes.
Ms. Cloutier?
Yes.
Mr. Liackos?
Yes.
Mr. Marco?
Yes.
Mr. Tierna?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Okay, I'll turn it over to Mr. Piffling.
Good evening, everybody. The business reports now, because of the snow rain out or the snow delay 2 weeks ago, these are from that original meeting, so these have not been updated. There'll be a new set of reports coming out in our meeting in 2 weeks. But I will cover a couple of highlights. Salary lines trending in the right direction. Transportation, we do have an issue with our encumbrance on transportation, so we are working on that, and I'm not sure that it will be fully understood for our next meeting, but I'm working towards that now. So there's a slight, you'll see that the transportation line took a big dip last month. That is out-of-district transportation. There were some out-of-district transportations that were not encumbered in Munis for us. So I'm working with my staff to identify that, as well as the special education department. Utilities are continuing to trend in the right direction, both electricity, water, and heating fuel. So those are all helping our budget situation. So that's really the highlights on the local budget. Are there any questions before I move on? I can't see anybody on the end. Okay. And then I'll skip right over to the revolving accounts. All of our revolving accounts are currently trending in the right direction. School lunch is getting close to a positive balance, and every year we have a large negative balance at the beginning of the year because we encumber all the salaries, and we have to pay down those salaries with school lunch sales throughout the year. So that's a positive. The one thing I do want to point out is transportation fees shows a positive balance of $114,000. I do need to transfer $112,000 back to the local budget, so that that number is inaccurate in the reports. I apologize, but everything else is as reported. Any questions on the revolving accounts? Thank you. I would move on to payroll warrants number 32 and 34 for approval, please.
I'll just ask for a motion to approve these warrants.
So moved.
Mr. Chairman,
Sorry.
Is it a rush? Okay, motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Thank you.
And we do have some gifts tonight. The first gift is from the Wakefield High School Girls Basketball Association to pay a stipend for an assistant basketball coach for this past winter season in the amount of $1,400.
And I'll ask if there's a motion to accept this gift with gratitude.
Mr. Chairman, I move the school committee accept with gratitude the donation of $1,400 from the Wakefield High School girls basketball to pay a stipend to the assistant basketball coach for this 2017-18 winter season.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Thank you.
And the other gift this evening is from the Friends of Wakefield High School basketball to pay stipends to 2 assistant coaches. The amount of this gift is $2,500.
Move the school committee accept with gratitude the donation of $2,500 for the Friends of Wakefield High School basketball to pay stipend to 2 assistant basketball coaches for the 2017-18 winter season.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Thank you.
That does conclude my business for this evening, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. Thank you, Mr. Piffling. Okay, my section. So we do have an agenda item tonight that is very just broadly the FY19 budget discussion, especially in lieu of what we just heard. So I'll just open it up to members of the school committee if there's any discussion on that. Now's the time.
Can I?
Please.
Dr. Smith, I'm sure we have data on the number of students with various disabilities. I just wanted to get a sense of the number of kids that are dyslexic or are classified as dyslexic in our town. in our town schools. And I'm not, I mean, I don't need names or anything. I was just wondering if that's something that could be provided, just so we can.
Absolutely. I'll get that to you for the next session.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I can't see anyone, so if you do have something, Mr. Markham, that was easy.
Thank you. So, one of the things that Dr. Smith and Mr. Piffling, what I would, in sort of backing up what Ms. Fortier just spoke about, I think there were a couple questions that we heard tonight. There was certainly a theme, and part of the theme I think we should address. Not necessarily this evening, because we're certainly unprepared for some of the questions, but I think by the next time, which I see on the agenda, we're not voting tonight, so I'm pleased to see that. They'll be voting at the potentially April 17th special meeting, is that?
So the school committee did have the option to vote tonight. My own personal opinion is, in lieu of what we've just heard, I would definitely recommend not voting tonight and voting at our next meeting.
Good, I would certainly
April
support that.
11th, I think.
April 11th.
Whatever that, yeah, 11.
Well, April 10 is a Tuesday.
10.
April 17 is a Tuesday.
April 10.
Okay. Okay. Well, the good news for me is we've got some questions to look into, and we have the time to do it, so I would certainly support not having that vote tonight. And perhaps some of the questions that were asked, we could certainly either be prepared to answer publicly at the April 10th meeting, or whenever the superintendent and the chair feel it appropriate. Because this isn't really a time for exchange, but I think we can certainly, in presentations that I know very much so that Dr. Smith, you and Mike and the special ed department have answers to these questions. You study these things in depth, and we certainly do not want to represent that you're not very capable and competent in making these answers, because indeed we are, or you folks are. But I think certainly the concerns that were raised tonight have every reason to be answered and addressed the best we can. I don't have anything specific, but there were some really good questions. The biggest one, again, a theme seemed to be the cost of out-of-district versus the cost of in-district services. And I know that's something that is probably discussed at the Finance Committee level. It certainly has been in the past. So certainly maybe there can be some remarks ready for April 10 to speak about that specific conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Markham. Dr. Smith, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kate.
I just wanted to say, obviously, thank you all for coming, but Dr. Smith, I had received some emails about the nursing situation from a parent that I forwarded to you, so I know you are prepared to answer that question tonight, if you could share with everybody what you shared with me.
Okay, so why don't I'd like to address special ed a little bit, especially since our parents are right here, but I will address nursing. So I sent a notice, notice to the school committee, a recommendation this week, and this is what Ms. Morgan's referring to, recommending that, as you know, I had originally recommended an increase of 0.5 nursing for Wakefield Memorial High School in the FY19 budget. Since that budget presentation, of course, I was trying to keep the balance of everything that we needed, but since that presentation, I have received a great deal of feedback and advocacy from not just the school nurses, but teachers, administrators, and parents, that need is greater than 0.5 and that 1.0 is really critical for safety. Key points in their advocacy that I took note of from both the high school and the middle school, each with an enrollment over 1,000 students, include the increasing number of significant and life-threatening medical conditions in our student population, the increasing number of students who struggle with anxiety or other social emotional health needs who require the nurse's care frequently, the increasing number of students who require medication distribution, the new state mandate for annual opioid abuse prevention screening for over 250 students at each school annually, and that the difficulty we face in finding substitute nurses if a school nurse is absent or supporting a field trip. So based on this rationale, I had sent to the school committee a recommendation that, my business manager, Michael Piffling, and I took a look to see what it would take to add an additional .5 nurse into the budget proposal, so changing it from .5 to 1.0, so that we would have 2 nurses at the middle school and 2 nurses at the high school. The ad was $28,281 to make that happen. So we started just digging into the personnel aspect of the budget to see what changes may have occurred since February 27th, which is at the time that I originally recommended my budget. We did note that we received a resignation from a PhD level teacher who is just moving on, moving out of the area next year. So coupling that savings with a plan with our principals to be sure that we hire at least 4 new hires at Master Step 3 instead of Master Step 4, we could cobble together that needed $28,000 and add the .5 nurse while maintaining the 5.54 increase into the FY19 budget. So I, wanted to make that recommendation to the school committee that was one item I wanted to respond to, and I think that's really in keeping with what the nurses have asked for this evening. So I feel like that's something that we, Mike and I, have figured out how to do without increasing the line. So that's nursing. The other thing I would just like to say, in regard to the special education piece, is there's like tremendous advocacy from our parents tonight. Thank you so much. I know all of their children and really understand their stories, and they told that story really well tonight. This is the reason that I added the district intervention services line to the budget a year ago. That's something that did not exist prior to my adding it. We started that line for the purpose of trying to bring in specialized instruction, specialized services. Reading is a big one. Anxiety is another one. The other woman that was here talked about therapeutic needs. This year, I did add to it. I would still say it's wholly insufficient in terms of the amount. I mean, if we're talking, 3 full-time people, does not have that much money in it yet. But my goal has been, as I espoused when I first put it in, that we need to keep adding to that line for this very purpose. And I'm really open to our consideration and talking about how we might add more this year or in coming years, but I think that they are really driving home a critical point and a need, is that if we're really, I think from my standpoint, if we're on the same page, as you know, as a district, we're trying to become a really true inclusion district. We want to keep our kids home. I'm hearing the parents say they want to keep their kids home in district. And in order to do that, we need to be able to support their very specialized learning needs in our schools. I think our teachers do yeoman's work, and we're providing them with all kinds of professional development. But I think it was Ms. Gaffney mentioned that, right now we have one person, at our Galvin Middle School with certain certification and qualifications. And I think the parents are saying, how it would be, or how amazing it would be if we had more of those people to service the students, and they're right. And it really comes down to really dedicating over time. I think it's unrealistic to say it can all happen in 1 year, but certainly over time we need to really make this a focus moving forward of how we keep building. But I think they're pointing to the right place in the budget, which is the district intervention services line. It's exactly what it's for. So.
Thank you, Dr. Smith.
Thanks. I'm so glad you expressed that, Dr. Smith, because I was thinking along the same lines, and I guess I just wanted the parents who came here tonight to know, how much we appreciate the input that we receive, because, the system, often doesn't work for every single family the way it should. But as Dr. Smith said, this school district and this school committee has been absolutely committed to a culture of equity and to the inclusion model. And we've spent a lot of time on that over the past few years. And as you've said, Dr. Smith, we've put a lot of resources into it. And I think that what your testimony tonight reinforced to me was the deep complexity of so much of our special education system, and the incredible variety and complexity of needs that these students have. And so I think it's something we have to continue to work on as a district. And continue to be conscious of in the budget. And I think there are so many things that we've built into, including the development of our educators over the past 4 or 5 years, that are serving all students well, both special education students and students not in special education. So I think it's important to remember that too. We've had tremendous growth in both the resources that we've put into the school district, in general, the curricular resources, but also the human resources. And but tonight, I think, demonstrated to us that we still have a long way to go. And I'm really glad to hear the way you articulated that, because I think, in principle, I think most of us really agree with the needs of the parents and the way they've articulated them tonight. It's really a matter of just how we get there. Thank you.
I lived IEPs for 13 years. So I understand the whole process pretty well. And I can tell you that what transpires today is miles ahead of what it was 20 years ago. And no, we're not all the way there yet. And I think it's kind of one of those things, it's kind of like owning a home. You're never really done. And that there's always got to be changing needs, and the complexity of the cases that we see today are very different than they have ever been before. I mean, I'm always amazed at the numbers of children we have living in our town that are medically fragile and that have very complex mental health issues at 4 years old that I never would have thought of if I wasn't on this committee. And we need to address all of those things. But just the notion that we don't talk about trying to keep the kids in district is just not really based on fact, because that's a conversation we have all the time. We may not have it here at this table in public because it's perhaps not always the right forum to talk about those things. But it is always first and foremost in our mind to try to service our students at home. Out-of-district placements are not our first choice. And they were only made when it's in the best interest of the child. And I would say a good percentage of the time it's the parent that requests it, not the school department that suggests it. So it's certainly a balancing act, and but we've always been in favor of trying to keep the students in-house as much as possible, and yet still make sure that they're getting the best possible care they can get. So those are conversations that will continue, and I'm sure Dr. Smith will have more data, perhaps. That I don't want to start quoting numbers because I'm sure I'd be wrong. But you know, it is where we go. So I mean, but just the thought that there's never analysis done is just not a way to be. And the whole process that we've done this year in trying to establish this budget, started in October. We start from zero. It's not, we don't keep money in a line just because it's always been there. We ask for proof that that line is still working, and or has the original thought for that line gone away, and we reallocate money someplace that's more current. And I think we have done a pretty good job of getting there. And we've included the Finance Committee from the get-go. We've already had 4 or 5 meetings between their liaisons, and we actually went to the full Finance Committee about a month ago and shared our thoughts and looked for direction as to how we might finalize our presentations. And I think we're in a good place now, and the effort to bring students back in district doesn't necessarily change our bottom line. Our bottom line request at town meeting would really, in my mind, would still stay the same. It's just perhaps how we're spending the money might swing, and that's always a fluid process. And we've made changes in this past year that said, okay, we're going to move this, this, and this, and that's going to free up some money so we can do that. And I think we remain flexible to get there. So I think that that's a process that we always have in mind, and we'll continue to do so.
May I? Oh, I'm sorry.
Please.
I wanted to address, first of all, I appreciate the nurses a great deal. I work in a school, and it is it's an amazing capacity that you all have to be able to eat lunch on the run and get the non-compliant kids to come and take their medication and then get called for picking up vomit in the hallway. I mean, you do everything, and I totally and utterly appreciate all of the work you do. It's incredible. So I support adding the 0.5 because I think it's a critical, definitely a critical piece to keeping the building safe for you and for the kids. And I wanted to also address the families that came here to speak. One of the hallmarks, I think, of Dr. Smith's process, as well as it being transparent, is certainly letting feedback or inviting feedback from families. So I know and I see a lot of you had attended the forum that she offered for parents. And that's, you know, a perfect place to kind of get a sense of what the vision is and for the instructional strategy, and then for you to be able to see, you know, where you might be able to have you and your child's needs met. So I really appreciate that you're able to sort of think big picture as well as thinking about what your own kids need. One of the most difficult things that I found in my first year is separating money from children. Like, they're not the same. You know, the kids come first. We need the finances and the resources to do what we need to do to support every child. But I think that we try very hard to figure out what are the needs and then apply the money towards those needs. Kids are first, and then we build the budget around that. As Chris said, you know, we start from scratch. And having this public forum is incredibly informative for me to sort of realize what, of course, your folks' priorities are, but you're a reflection of the larger community. And of course, I've heard priorities from other families as well. But this opportunity to hear your voice and for you to understand even more fully our process, I think will make this going forward even better. You know, and maybe we won't get there, but we'll always strive. We'll always move towards that place of meeting all of our kids with where they're at. Thank you.
Mr. Massey.
Thank you. Thought there was a lot of valid concerns and good proposals tonight, and I think that's something we should definitely take away tonight. I am reading, however, the one silver lining here. It looks like 41 students attend out-of-district schools, which is 1.1%. Most districts in our area range are about 2%. So I think that is the one silver lining where we're doing a little bit better than others. Does not mean we can't do better, though. And I'm just kind of curious, Dr. Smith, do you think it could be kind of a lack of discipline and going the extra miles with coordinators and teachers, or do you think it's a lack of personnel, or more of a combination of both?
In regard to
special education, kind of coordinators, teachers, all the staff.
So I think the parents here are spot on. I think what we need to continue to do better is to have more specialized instruction. They kind of fall in different buckets. You know, there's reading instruction, which is a critical piece. Ms. Boudreau mentioned the anxiety piece, and someone else mentioned the social emotional therapeutic piece. As you know, last year we added a behavior coach and a certified board behavior analyst. That's been very helpful. This year it's adding those specialized, highly qualified, certified people in those specialized areas to really help us build a truly inclusive school district. And I thank you for pointing out our out-of-district placement is actually comparatively low, but we still want to do better. We want still there are some students that need to be out of district. At the end of the day, there are students that they to get what they need, they must be out, and that's perfectly fine. We need to give kids what they need. But I still believe there are more kids that can be with us if we're able to provide what they need to be here with us. So does that answer your question,
It does,
Mr. Massey?
yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, please. Thank you. I just had, Chris's comments just prompted a couple additional thoughts from me. And one was when he mentioned the Finance Committee. It made me realize that the input and the advocacy that we hear from parents tonight also helps us with that larger conversation with the Finance Committee, with town meeting, with the broader community. So for example, there was a comment tonight about the Board of Selectmen. Just so the public knows, the Board of Selectmen actually has no formal role in the development of the school budget. Dr. Smith will present to the Board of Selectmen, and we appreciate their input and their support, but it's actually a more critical role is the Finance Committee, because they are charged with recommending our budget at town meeting where the final vote happens. And so I think Andy Bray was mentioning the ongoing dialogue with the Finance Committee, and I think one of the things we've done this year is we really demonstrated to the Finance Committee how important our work is with our special education students, planning, all the work that we've talked about tonight, thinking about in-district versus out-of-district, making sure we've, have the right diagnosis, the right services at the right time for all these students, and we've established a stabilization fund to help us budget and more effectively plan for costs, special education costs in the future. So we've really made a commitment as a district to meet the needs of our special education students, and that ongoing dialogue with the Finance Committee has been a big part of that, and I think they have a better understanding of many of the topics we're trying to tackle with this budget this year too. So I just wanted to reemphasize that as well.
I agree, and one thing that the parents in this room might like to hear is when we were at that meeting, those of us that were there with the most recent one with the Finance Committee, I shared with them an artist rendering of what the difference is between equity and equality.
Yep.
And where equality, and I think they really understood it through this sort of, pictorial kind of telling or narrative. And basically, when we talk about equality, it's every kid getting the same thing. Like every kid gets the same thing. What equity is that every student gets what they need, and that's going to look differently for every child. And it's a great picture of these three students trying to look over a fence to see a baseball game. And one student's like super short, so he's like looking right into the fence. Oh, there it is, and can't see. All three kids have the exact same thing. They all have something to stand on to try to look over, but it doesn't do the job. But the tallest kid doesn't really need something to stand on, but that little guy does need a lot more to stand on to access the game. And that really is the difference between equality and equity. And it was really kind of a great moment with the Finance Committee where we really talked about that and how important it is not, and one of the reasons I shared it is not to pit general education and special education against one another. And sometimes that happens because there's only, so much money and people are, where does the money go? And it's not about that. It's about giving every child what every child needs. And so I think it was a great moment where we all just really shared our thinking around that, and everyone was really on the same page. And I think that was an important moment to your point, Mr. Liakis.
I'll just echo what's been said. I'll also especially echo Mr. Markham's point at the outset about possibly having some numbers or maybe even a one-pager surrounding out-of-district tuitions and out-of-district placements, just for my own processing there. As I know Dr. Smith knows because I've spoken about it with her before, I know as many of you know because we've had conversations before, out-of-district placements are always something that I have personally felt we should be doing we should be working towards definitely decreasing. Dr. Smith is totally correct in saying there are always going to be certain students whose services must be offered at a particular out-of-district campus, and that's fine. A lot of what we heard tonight, though, was a lot of reading and language-based out-of-district placements, which can be done in Wakefield, and frankly, which should be done in Wakefield. There's a worthy financial analysis around all of that, about the savings of bringing a child in district and tuition costs alone. But that's a distant second to what is most important to me, which is the fact that I want these kids in Wakefield, and their families want them in Wakefield. So if there is, this is definitely a larger conversation. It's a conversation that's happening everywhere, and it's a conversation about shifting culture, and it does take dollars, and those dollars will never all come at once. But if there's a time that we could begin that, or be doing more for that, especially in light of what happened in our FY18 budget, then the District Intervention Services line is where it should happen. So you're correct to pinpoint that, and where it is my hope that we will continue to grow that line so that we can bring some of these kids back in district, which benefits the entire community when that happens. So thank you all. Okay, anything else on this?
So just to finally wrap this up, so
Sure.
our plan then is to come back in 2 weeks, have a final conversation about the FY19 budget and take a vote?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great.
And then we'll get some numbers with respect to out-of-district placement, and then just sort of a breakdown, I think would be helpful of, I don't know if this is easy, but what kind of resources the students would need. I just want to make sure that we can see, if we bring students in, I mean, of course, we're not paying out-of-district fees anymore, but does that truly translate into a savings? I mean, if we're just looking at numbers, I just need some information about that.
And I'll get that together and get it to you next week. And I do want to make one important point. I don't want to turn this conversation into that it's just about bringing kids back in from out of district, because we have lots of students currently in the Wakefield Public Schools that need these,
Same
you know,
services.
need these services now.
Okay,
Right?
yeah.
And I think that was part of what they were saying. There's a lot of kids right now that are in the Wakefield Public Schools
Sure.
that really require and need this level of specialized instruction.
Right, right. It's just there were a couple of people who made the argument.
Right.
And I just want to be able to address that,
Yeah.
you know, with some actual information.
Thank you. Okay. The next portion of the Human Rights Commission correspondence, it's in the packet. The Human Rights Commission will be coming before us to ask for an additional commissioner appointment for this year. We're not voting on that tonight. I just put it in the packet so we can be aware that that's something that's on the horizon. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Markham for the report of the Superintendent Screening Committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've reported the last, the last few meetings that progress has been being made since we established the superintendent search back in January. And I'm pleased to say that notwithstanding some couple of nor'easter snowstorms and a couple of curveballs just to make things interesting, that we are on schedule as the school committee's original outline hoped that we would be. So with that in mind, we're presenting a report this evening, and we have some finalists to recommend to the school committee. Let me just say a couple things, if I may. First, we had a community forum. I know we spoke about it once very, very briefly, and I'll just speak about it again very briefly. But we had a community forum over in the Savings Bank Theater, which was incredibly informative. I would speculate that we didn't take minutes or any of that, but I would speculate we had 50-plus people there, and people of all walks of life within the community, within the school community, and the community at large. I think that really helped inform some of the thinking about the type of the next education leader that we may be looking for. We found lots of good input from across the school district, employees of all kinds, parents, former parents, members of the Alumni Association. It was just really, really well spoken folks who have a great interest in the future of the school district, and that was very informative as we the steering committee, the screening committee did its work. Secondly, I'd like to just publicly recognize the members of the screening committee who I joked with them the other day that after tonight, unless something goes terribly awry, you won't be getting a daily email from me, so you can all relax about that. But they've really done lots of work in a fairly short period of time, meaning lots of meetings, hours, lots of time on their own, as well as deliberative work as a group. And it was just a delight to hear the depth of conversation around the table. It was really enlightening. I'd just like to recognize them once again publicly. In no particular order, Mistel Burdick, who's a third grade teacher at the Woodville School. Harry Robinson is a teacher here at Wakefield High School. Andrew Tetrall, the assistant principal at Galvin Middle School. Jane McConnell, paraprofessional at Galvin Middle School. Deborah Calora, principal of the Greenwood Elementary School. Adam Colantoni, principal of Galvin Middle School. Maria Serrao, director of facilities and transportation. Lee Farber, a parent at the Woodville School. Matthew Leary, a parent at the Galvin School. Chrissy Loftus, a parent and representing special education parents, or CPAC. Mary La Letchford, who's a parent also representing Wakefield Education Foundation. Kevin Piscadlo, community member, former school committee member, representing Wakefield Alumni Foundation. Marcy Seidman, parent and community member. Steve Mayo, the town administrator, and Richard Smith, the police chief. It was a large group. Didn't turn out quite, frankly, didn't turn out to be unwieldy at all, size-wise, and it really lent itself nicely to lots of discussion. And I want to thank each of those members for the time that they took away from families and friends and their career in many ways, or their work, to make a very tight schedule in what was supposed to be about 4 or 5 weeks. Throw in a couple of nor'easters here every week, for it seemed like. But nonetheless, I do want to certainly recommend, to thank them very much for their time in making this work. So to the superintendent process itself, Wakefield continuing the last couple of years' worth of energy and effort, certainly highlighted by the outstanding work of Dr. Smith within the larger community outside of Wakefield. A tremendous amount of interest in people interested in coming to Wakefield, interested in leading Wakefield. Some statistics that I picked up on in talking with leaders at the Mass Association of School Committees as well as Mass Association of School Superintendents, that the number of applicants we received, which was 28, was much more than people are seeing in search processes in other communities. It just really speaks well to the type of school district that we have, notwithstanding, as we all know, and that there's always work to be done, there's always improvement to be made. We need to live on a path of continuous improvement, but that being said, there's a tremendous amount of energy within the district and some motion. So having 28 applications was a very high number in today's world of superintendent searches. So the screening committee certainly had its work to do with a fairly high number of applicants. We also, of the 28, we were incredibly well positioned to have some incredibly talented and qualified people. That just made our task even harder, which is frankly a good problem to have, but nonetheless it certainly did. So after deliberations, we culled that number down to about 10. After further conversation and deliberation, culled that number down to 6, and we invited 6 people in for interviews. From the 6, then the work became incredibly hard because we had, sort of the cream of the crop of the top 6 of the 28 most interesting people, perhaps, in the Commonwealth. So that being said, we were able in what became a marathon session pretty much all day Saturday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. or so at Galvin. And I'm pleased to recommend on behalf of the screening committee three educators to present to the school committee as a finalist as it now enters into the public process. So recommendation, and they're in no order, so this is an alphabetical listing of the three individuals. Jared Fulgoni, who is the Assistant Superintendent for the Haverhill Public Schools. Susan Custa, who is Assistant Superintendent for the Weymouth Public Schools. And Douglas Alliance, who is the Assistant Superintendent for the Wakefield Public Schools. I have here this evening to pass out to committee members the resumes and portfolio materials for these three finalists. And our deliberative work begins next. Our work, of course, as we know, and just to restate for the community at large, is all done in public. And we will begin with a couple of things in the next couple of weeks. The superintendent and I have been talking, and the chairman and I as well, have been talking about some schedules over the next couple of weeks to continue on the timeline that the school committee approved back in January, and it's our initiative to present tonight verbally, and you'll receive, if this seems to be a workable schedule verbally, we'll condense it to paper and produce it in the next 24 hours. So the first recommendation that we're making is that we invite these three educators to join us here in the district and spend a day in the district to get to know Wakefield, get to know the community, get to know the schools, get to know the buildings, or at least spend a day trying to do that. Our recommendation is next Thursday, April 5. We would like to start early in the morning at 8 a.m. with a very robust schedule and a rotation. The three educators will not be in the same rotation. They'll be in Wakefield in the same day, but not necessarily in the same cycle of activities. The activities will consider a meeting, having a tour guide who will spend the day with them and walk and drive across district as necessary, visiting each of the buildings, each of the schools, having a chance to meet with the senior staff, having a chance to meet with the principals, having a chance to meet with the faculty, however briefly in each of the buildings. We're putting a proposal out there just to see if there's an appetite for it, to have during the lunch, to see if we could get a school committee member to host lunch or participate in lunch for the individuals. I've had the privilege of obviously meeting the three of them, and would excuse myself from that process and try to get one or two others among the three individuals, maybe to have an informal conversation, enjoy lunch, and get that breakdown a little bit. I think that might be a nice way for the school committee to have an informal session or informal opportunity. That, of course, is a Thursday. It may not be workable, and if it's not, our lives and jobs and all of that, get in the way sometimes of our work. But nonetheless, if that doesn't get to be, Dr. Smith had some other thoughts. Perhaps we could impose upon some town officials to fill in that void. But so and then the afternoon would continue rotations around the district, visiting places of interest, visiting the schools, and then we would have a community forum. We'd have sort of a meet and greet, again in rotation, which we would have in the Galvin Learning Commons in the evening. In the evening on Thursday, April 5. It would then, as consistent with the schedule, the recommendation is that then we have public interviews for the three applicants, the three finalists, on Tuesday, April 10, which is consistent with the schedule that was presented, timeline rather. So with now introducing budgetary conversations into the April 10, we'll need to work on that, but I have every faith that the chairman and the superintendent can figure out timing around that. The suggestions that we were looking at was something like, each of the candidates at, 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m. Maybe that's oversimplified, maybe we have the meeting first or the meeting last, whatever. But if we certainly want to stay on the timeline, we would need to have it in there unless we throw in a special meeting. And it continues to be the recommendation that the following week, which would be Tuesday, April 17, be the public deliberation among school committee members and vote, or possible vote, as the agenda needs to read, but vote for the candidacy of the next school superintendent. So that's the recommendation moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Markham, and thank you for all the work that you did in leading the screening committee sticking to a very difficult timeline, especially with the storm. So I appreciate all the work you did there. Anything from the school committee on this?
So just to clarify, so so the summary of this you're going to send to us in writing is a memo with the dates and some more detail on the 5th.
What I figured that if the timetable, which is consistent with the original timetable, continues to make sense, then we put this to paper and share it out.
Right.
But I figured this, so we didn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. Well, from my perspective, it sounds perfect and echo.
Do we think members might be interested in having lunch? Anyone perhaps be able to be available during the day on Thursday?
I can definitely make myself available.
I may be able to.
I may be able to as well.
Okay, well, there's a week plus notice now, so be thinking about that. I think, and I must, obviously thank Dr. Smith for the idea. It was her idea. But I thought it was a terrific one when we were talking about it, that it really made sense in a nice informal way. We couldn't put more than 3 people in front of them anyways, but nonetheless, but it's a nice way in a very informal setting to have lunch. These people are going to be on a whirlwind tour, so they're going to need a time to slow down, and 11:30, is probably, or 11:45 or thereabouts is a good time to take a morning break, break bread, have a lunch, and then begin the afternoon. So if the committee is up for that, please shoot me an email or a text or something and let me know if you'd be up for that, and we'll make that happen. We still up for April 10 and April 17 for the public interviews on the 10th and the vote on the 17th? The deliberation
I
of
think
vote?
so, yeah. I think it's really important that we wrap this up by the 17th, if at all possible, yeah.
I agree, which is why I'm incredibly complimentary to the screening committee, because I was just like, we are chugging along. We are not slowing down this potty train at all. But they were incredibly gracious and supportive.
To that point.
I was going to say, if I knew it was a party train, I would have been a part of this.
I know. Well, next time.
Too bad.
To that point, I will just say, the meeting on the 10th will definitely be longer than our normal meeting, so my thinking is to probably try to see if we can start at 6 o'clock for that meeting. And this is all, I'm just putting this out there. I'll work with Dr. Smith and Judy in getting the agenda. And also, as the 17th is going to be a special meeting, so I do just ask the school committee members keep that night open for some very important work that evening. Mr. Markham, do you need a vote to accept the 3 finalists from the screening committee?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. I don't believe so. The screening committee was charged by the school committee to do this. I suppose you could reject it, but I'm not aware that we need a vote to accept it. We have now discharged our duties in what we were authorized to do.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Smith, your portion.
Okay, so it's getting late, so I'll just be brief. As you know, as promised, one of the things I've really been working on is to try to get the Wakefield Public Schools in some rhythms around reporting out on student growth and target growth data. And if you recall, I'm really, promoting or looking at the idea of having a district-level data dashboard that will be reporting out kind of over a 5-year span. So we really take a look kind of over the longer term. At the school improvement plan level, that's a 1-year look at data. And we're going to try to go with fall, winter and spring. And then at the school level, at the professional learning community level, it's really every 6 days. It's ongoing formative data. So we're looking at like 3 big cycles of data, 5 years, 1 year, and then weekly and ongoing formative data. So I shared with you the mid-year data from the school improvement plans. To thank all the principals and the school councils for getting those back to me. I can take any questions that you have on that growth, but it shows like kind of growth in the right places and things look like we're on track. But again, a lot of this is about getting people in the rhythms, and I hope to kind of encourage the committee and the next superintendent to plan that the second meeting in November, the second meeting in March, and the second meeting in June to come back and share that data with the school committee. It's not something we've ever done well before, I think, in the Wakefield Public Schools. I think sometimes we hear about the school improvement plans, and then, we don't really kind of monitor progress as a team. And so I want to continue to espouse that we do that. So we were able to get the school improvement plan data as up to date as possible. And so that's all in your packet for you to look at. I am very pleased to share that the district data dashboard is up and running. We're not officially live for the entire community yet because I think there's some communication that will need to take place, and I think as we get to the end of the year and we have that first year in, we can do that. But in your packet, I gave you just sort of a one-page information sheet to just kind of tell you a little bit about the district data dashboard. It gives you the link so you can get on there. You just kind of remind everybody, it identifies the target growth measures, and you'll see that they're tightly aligned with all the school improvement plans. And then I gave you some points to kind of think about or to know as you start looking at it. Each growth measure starts with a theory of action, which is like an if-then statement. Basically, what are we doing that we believe will influence growth in this target measure? And if we're successful, what would be the desired result? So that the if-then statement starts, and then you'll see a series of graphs for each growth measure. And each growth measure includes both proficiency or achievement data and growth data. And I'm really passionate about growth data, that we shouldn't just look at achievement, we should look at growth. They tell 2 different stories, and side by side they can really tell you a lot. The aim is to do the 5-year trends, so right now, the graphs on the district data dashboard, where we have it available, start us at FY16 and would like that arc to go from FY16 to FY20. Once we arrive at FY20, the plan would be to adjust the 5-year range annually from that point on, so that you can, for the long, over the long haul, always be looking at 5 years of data at a time. So right now, a couple of places, FY18 was our starting point. The writing data, the math discourse data, and the PLC data begin this year. So for this school year, we'll show fall, winter, spring, and then next year convert the graphs to show FY18 to 20 to kind of get on pace with the other ones. And then by FY20, all of them will be rolling over to 5-year. I did want to note that we don't have the winter data for the 5 through 12 writing until the close of term 3, which is in about a week. So that will be uploaded soon. I did want to just make sure I just reminded everyone that because the state assessment has been changing, that in grade 3 through 8 math and ELA, it compares PARCC scores in FY16 to MCAS 2.0 scores in FY19. And you probably recall from last fall when Assistant Superintendent Lyons shared with you all of that information that the statewide student test scores were anticipated to decline when we went to this new MCAS 2.0, and they did. The department encourages us not to compare the two, as they're very different assessments. But in order to get things up and running, I included them both just so you could see what it's going to look like over time. But by next year, I think our best bet is just to drop the PARCC scores and then really just track MCAS 2.0 from FY18 to FY20 and beyond. The only difference is in the high school data. So the grade 10 data is valid because they've been continue to take the generation MCAS assessment, and that's the traditional one. It really is, this kind of shows why the dashboard is powerful, because it does show that growth that led the high school to become a level 1 school this year. So really impressive to see that level of growth, both in achievement and growth, actually, on the high school data for the state assessment. The math discourse and PLC data was derived from professional observation, as you know, and I described to you in the past using performance rubrics. So in the dashboard, I've included the links to those rubrics. So if you want to look at what are the rubrics say, what are the performance level indicators for professional learning communities and for math discourse, and that way you can really kind of see what it is that we're really looking at, and then you can kind of look at the data itself to see how we're progressing. So on the math, our K-12 math coach and math curriculum coordinator gathered the data from all schools, all classrooms at all grade levels, and they report out in 3 grade level bands. So we're really looking at, the K-4 space, the 5-8 space, and the 9-12 space, and how we're progressing with math discourse. And then myself and the principals gathered all the observational data for how we're progressing as a district in our professional learning community work. We observed many, many PLC teams in action. Then we synthesized the data to view it from a district perspective, pre-K to 12. So you'll see all of that. Very special thank you to math coach Jason Wallace, who helped me create this data dashboard. Those of you who know me know that I would not have been able to do that by myself. So I was really happy to have a lot of help with someone who's kind of an expert in putting all of this data together. But that does. I wrote in your notes this week that it does make me continue to think about data management across the district. And one of the things I'm really thinking about that we maybe can talk about in the coming weeks is how, maybe supporting a data specialist stipend to monitor this moving forward. I mean, one of the things we learned in trying to do this is that data is housed in all different places, and some of our data, unfortunately, left with people who left the district. So I think it's really important we house data in a centralized location, have someone that can really help us manage that data, continue to fill the data dashboard, on a regular basis. And then that person or people could also support any special projects. So if someone asked questions tonight about special education or students with disabilities or whatever, we really wanted to see data in a really sophisticated form with charts or graphs or things that really tell the story, that we would have somebody to go to say, hey, can you pull this data? I'd love to be able to, as the educational leader, ask good questions and then have that data specialist say, I can get that data for you and I can help display it in a user, friendly way for the community. So that's something I'm going to be talking about in the upcoming weeks and months. So that is the data piece at mid-year. Does anyone have any specific questions they'd like to ask? Or I'm also cognizant it's after 9 o'clock. You can ask me in the coming weeks if you would like as well.
So I just wanted to say, I think the presentation, the dashboard is really clean and nice, and given the complexity of the information that we're trying to convey. And we don't have to talk about it tonight, but I think just as important as getting it up there, obviously, is communicating it to the parents and the community at large, and whatever role we can help play as a school committee in helping get that information out there and getting feedback on it, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think the plan is the end of the school year, either in June or to roll out next school year. I think I really want to talk to the principals and district level administrators about kind of the timing of the communication rollout. But I think by then we'll have that full year of data in and we'll be ready to go.
Right.
So thank you.
Will you have, so right now, as I look at the dashboard, there's just the graph. Will there be any text that sort of describes what the graph means? I mean, I'm seeing, I'm assuming going up is good and coming down is bad.
A narrative, accompanying narrative.
So which one are you looking at?
How bad?
What are you looking at right now, Ann? Are you looking at something in
I'm
particular?
looking at, I was looking at all of, I was just looking at the
Let's just pull one out of the
K4, yeah, I was looking at the K4 math discourse.
Okay, so if you open up the math discourse, we start by talking about the theory of action,
Yeah.
which, if we teach students to verbally articulate their thinking in math, contribute to a group discussion, providing rationale with evidence, building on each other's ideas, questioning and solving problems together. That's the if, that's what we're trying to do to influence growth. Then our students will demonstrate increasing readiness for college and career, as well as stronger growth and performance in math reasoning. So then it shows the, you can click on the math discourse rubric to really look at very specifically where we're trying to grow and the performance indicators on a scale of 1 through 4. And you can see there's elements of questioning, explaining mathematical thinking, the source of mathematical ideas, and students' responsibility for learning, and a performance descriptor for each level. So that kind of describes like what it is that we're looking at. So then if you look at the rubric, at the graph, you can see that the growth in K to 4, for example, this is elementary, K to 4. You can look at the overall score increased in the fall from, it looks like about a 1.6 or 1.65 up over a 2. So if you kind of go back to the rubric, you can see where the students are. Do you think that's easy enough to read, and that's or not?
Well, yeah, it might be. I might have just gone over my head, but I'm just wondering.
Well, our goal is to be user-friendly, so this is really good feedback. We're trying to make it as simple and as clear as possible, so that the layperson that doesn't necessarily know anything about math, but you would like to kind of understand what's happening, that they might be able to navigate this. So I think if anything's confusing, it's really good for me to know, so we can keep working with it.
I think I'm the right person. But, I think what might be helpful is just making sure that people understand you have to, like, if you just look at the graph, it really has no meaning, that it's important that people.
There's a sequence.
You have to read the theory of action first, just the way you explained it.
Maybe on the front page, there could be a prompt to say, for each one, read the theory of action. Take a look at the rubric. It'll help you better understand.
Guide to this system.
And then maybe just a little information about how this information was gathered. Because it's not test scores. It's observation from.
Pretty much what I put that I just read in my.
Exactly.
I'll put that in there, maybe.
Put that in there so that I think people will have a little bit more understanding why it's a 2, how did they get to that?
And what professionals are doing the observational data. These aren't just random individuals. These are, highly qualified people gathering this observational
data.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that will give it more meaning, as opposed to people might think it's the teachers are saying, my kids are all the way up at 4, but in fact, it's not the teachers, it's the observers.
That's great feedback. Thank you. Maybe some directions on the cover page.
Directions are good, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I have one more for the calendar. Okay. The last thing I have, so that was data. Oh, then the field trip. So there is a field trip request form in your packets, and that is for a trip for 2019, and that is to our Spanish faculty, Bridget Reed and Sarah Bardet. It's really a culmination of the Spanish language learning experience. This is typical of many of the trips that we've run. Principal Metropolis has reviewed it all with me. Looks fantastic. Heading off to Madrid, and it's during April vacation. So that is in your packet.
So I will just ask for a motion that the school committee approve the Wakefield Memorial High School field trip request for Spain from April 11th to April 19th, 2019 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion, any questions? All in favor? Thank you.
Okay, and then the last thing on my list is the school calendar, as promised. I made a few little corrections, nothing significant, just little errors that we found since the last time. As you know, we partnered with the town to allow for town elections to occur at the Galvin Middle School on September 4th and November 6th, which I think is a great partnership between the school department and the town. We sent this back to the Wakefield Education Association, to our school councils, to lots and lots of folks to look at, get feedback from. This is the final version. I think we're in great shape with it. So I'm bringing it for your approval for the 2018-19 school year. I do want to mention that this is separate from the Learn Anywhere conversation, like how and if and how you make up snow days is a separate conversation. I've been talking to Chairman Tiro about on May 8th, I'd like to have a group of the folks who do our audit will be coming to do a presentation for you with lots of information about the experiences, what we've learned, the many successes, the struggles, the different things that have gone, have gone well, and the places we feel like we need to grow. They'll be coming on May 8th, and then in addition to that, right now I have a team building a survey. There'll be a survey that will go to students, a survey that will go to educators, and a survey that will go to parents, and it'll be broken up into grade bands. So there'll be a pre-K 4 survey, a 5-8 survey, and then a 9-12 and post-academy survey. So there'll be an opportunity for us to really understand the data that comes in for how to continue to really improve what we do. So this calendar is really separate from that conversation. This is really just about the district calendar, proposed calendar for 2018-19.
Okay, is there a motion that the school committee approve the 2018-19 district calendar as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Questions? Mr. Yakos.
Sorry, thanks, Tom. So, could you just talk about the impact, potential impact on the education on that day of the election being Galvin?
Okay, so what we have decided to do, because of the elections and the town requesting our partnership in that, is on Tuesday, September 4th, we will not have opened yet. So other than we do want the Galvin teachers to be able to come in and work in their classrooms, but I think there'll be plenty of parking for voters to come in. So we really won't be in the way at all on the 4th. Okay. And then on November 6th, for that election, that'll be a professional development day. Okay. And we'll host professional development at sites other than the Galvin. Okay. So right. The Galvin will be wide open.
Got it, thank you. And that will replace another professional development day that it already scheduled one, we're just shifting it on a day.
Yes.
We're not adding one.
Correct.
Got it, thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Markham?
Thank you. So I'm really pleased to see the calendar, and there were two particular things on here that I think are great community conversations that I'd like to ask my colleagues and even ask the superintendent as she prepares notes for our next superintendent, because these conversations will really be throughout next year. But the two issues are the use of the Galvin for town elections. I think that's a community conversation we should have. With, I think having it on one day, or excuse me, not one day, but one location, has seen has been beneficial in the past. But there's some divided views. I'm not sure that we, the school committee, need to play a role in the politics of that. Let the selectmen and the town clerk handle that. But we are a party to it. So one thing that I'd like to see, because obviously we've not made a commitment for the April 2019 town election. So I assume then that however that's going to roll out, everyone's going to say, gee, this worked out great, and let's do it in April as well. Let's do all town elections in one location, or is this just an experiment? And I'm fine either way, but this is a community conversation that I'm thrilled to have us be a party to, because it obviously impacts teaching and learning. And maybe April could be another professional development day, and then we've solved a really nice problem that the selectmen feel are important. So I'd like to prompt that community conversation to continue throughout next year. The other thing that I would like us to continue to have, well, let me first say, I'm really pleased to see a pretty thorough listing, not exhaustive, but thorough listing of important dates with regard to religious holidays next year. Not necessarily are those related to days off or that, but certainly they are prominently listed. And as I think this committee has made a commitment over the years, and we need to continue to do so, to be ever mindful of religious observations of the many faiths in our town, and to be ever mindful of making sure that teachers are supportive of that and not providing extraordinary instruction, not providing homework that may be conflicting with one's faith practice. So I'm really pleased to see those prominently listed. With that in mind, I'd also like us, and I ask my colleagues that this perhaps conversation occur much earlier than March of next year, but we honestly have a comprehensive conversation around Good Friday. I think we have dodged a bullet that Good Friday next year is during April school vacation week. So I'm not prepared to prompt that conversation now, but I think it's one that is worthy of being had. So I'd like to ask my colleagues for that and ask Dr. Smith that she put both of those in notes for the incoming superintendent to discuss earlier with all parties, not just the school committee, but with the community, with the teachers. And there's a rolling effect of these things. And I don't think we should be ever mindful of one set of holidays while taking Good Friday off. I don't necessarily have a cause to say we should or shouldn't. I think it's a conversation that is long overdue. But I'm certainly more than prepared to support the superintendent's recommendation for next year's school calendar. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on this? Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, Dr. Smith.
That's it. I think I'm all set.
Okay, great. Thank you. Subcommittee reports, Finance and Facilities. Mr. Callanan.
We are trying to schedule a facilities meeting. We had one scheduled and got snowed out, so we'll be coming up shortly on a facilities meeting. I think finance is pretty settled for now.
Thank you. Labor and Personnel, Mr. Markham.
The Labor has not met as a subcommittee since the superintendent search process has been ongoing. I'm also unaware of any particular matters that would be directed to the committee at this time, so thank you.
Thank you. Policy and Planning, Ms. Fourier.
We just met right before this meeting, and we went over our 3 agenda items. The first that we spoke about was talking about crowdfunding and having a policy around that, and it turns out we do already have one. It's subsumed in our fundraising policy that includes crowdfunding, and Dr. Smith said that she will remind the principals about fundraising and crowdfunding policy to the principals for next year as they come back to school. That took a lot longer to say than I needed to. I apologize.
But it was very well said.
No, it wasn't. It was clunky, tired. We then spoke about our wellness policy, and that was in reference to the child nutrition audit that the district had. And so I'm going to be updating that, passing it through for the subcommittee folks to review, and we'll speak about that in a meeting in the future. And then we also talked at length about our meal charging policy, which reflects one set of responses to when a student is in arrears with their meal account versus what the policy should reflect based on the DESE recommendation. Well, it's actually the Mass Association of School Committees recommendation. So I'm going to run through that, and then we'll talk more about that as a committee, and then we'll, in the near future, present that to both of those policies to the board, to the committee.
Excellent. Thank you.
Man.
Future dates and agenda items. Okay, so we've hit both of these, Tuesday the 10th and also Tuesday the 17th. School committee comments. Mr. Massey.
Thank you.
Ms. Morgan.
I'm all set, thank you.
Mr. Callahan.
Good, thank you.
Ms. Fortier.
I'm all set.
Mr. Liakos. Mr. Markham.
All set, thank you.
Excellent. I have nothing as well, so I'll just ask if there's a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn the school committee meeting of Tuesday, March 27, 2018.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.